whatever time zone you are watching me in. I am Kadisha Henry, and I am going to be your cybersecurity teacher as you progress through the course. This morning, we are going to be looking at security fundamentals. So, what we are focusing on this morning is security fundamentals. So, my aim this morning is to provide you with some comprehensive understanding of some key concepts, okay, in security fundamentals. And as you progress through the course, these concepts and terminologies you must have in your vocabulary. So, how the class is set up, I am going to be teaching on each key concepts, and then we're going to do scenarios on each of them and multiple choice. So I am going to be giving you break. So whenever there is a 10 minutes or a 5 minute silence, it means that you are on a break, okay? Because we have quite a bit to go through. So what is our objective for today? We're going to be looking at threats and vulnerability. All of these are key concepts in security fundamentals. We're going to be looking at confidentiality, integrity, availability, non repudiation, authentication, authorization, accounting, security control categories, security control types, and gap analysis and zero trust. So, all of these we'll be going through, and we'll be doing multiple choice and we'll be doing scenarios. So you get a better understanding of what we're talking about. So the first one that we'll be looking at this morning in the security fundamental concepts, our key concept is threats and vulnerabilities. What is threat? When we talk about threat, what is a threat? It's an external actors or event that poses risk to an organization. So it's an external actors or events that poses a risk to an organization's security, right? And these can be deliberate attacks like malware, or it can be accidental events like natural disaster. So let's take for an instant what's happening in California. That's a natural disaster. Deliberate attack is when a malicious individual try to inject some um, worm or try to hold your system at ransom. Those are deliberate external events, okay? When we talk about vulnerabilities, we're talking about weakness in a system or application that could be exploited by threat to compromise the security, right? And these vulnerabilities can be in a software, a hardware, or even a human process. So a weakness in the system is what we call a vulnerability. So let's look at some threats and vulnerabilities to give you better understanding. Malware, malicious software designed to harm the computer system or to steal data. Example of these may include virus, worms, and ransomware. So you didn't fix the system, you didn't put anything in place. So the malicious individual, the malicious attackers, or malicious actors or hackers find a vulnerability in the system and they exploited it. Let's look at phishing. That's another one. It's an attempt to obtain sensitive information by impersonating a legit source. So many times you get email from Amazon saying that your account has been compromised, or you get a UPS message and all of those kind of emails that you get a message stating that your system is compromised, somebody's trying to act to enter into your system. And so what happened is that you fill out that information and the malicious individuals, attackers, take your information, your password, your financial details, and they're gone with it. So one example is always this email that comes in that the bank say that you are to fill this information out because your account is compromised, or you owe this money, and you start filling out the form, and that form goes straight back to the malicious attackers because they impersonated that particular organization. So when you think that you are sending back the link to them, it is rewrote to the malicious attackers website, and they get all your information. So scenario as it relates to vulnerabilities, unpatched software is one. So you have a smartphone that you use every day, but you haven't updated the software in a few months, right? You were told to update it, you were reminded to update it, but you didn't. So one day you read in the news that there is a security flaw in the version of your phone operating system that hackers can exploit to steal data and to take control of your phone. Why? Because you didn't do the patch, right? So the threat in this scenario is a security vulnerability, right? So they're going to do what? Exploit the security flaw that is in the system. What's a security flaw? You didn't do the patch. There is a problem with that version of the operating system. So the threat in this scenario is a security vulnerability being exploited by hackers, right? And hackers can use this flaw to steal information, your personal data, your password, contacts, and even take control of your device because there was a vulnerability and they got in, right? What's the vulnerability in this case? The vulnerability here is that you didn't apply the security patch or updates that were released to fix the flaw. And this made your device an easy target for cyber attack. So the vulnerability is your failure to update the software. Whenever there is a piece of software that is out on the market, you always have to look out for patches and updates that they're going to send because malicious attackers or hackers are always maybe 10 step off people. They know a lot of us are not going to be bothering with updating our software. So they are always listening out and they are always researching to find what piece of device out there that have some security flaws, and they will try to exploit those vulnerabilities, right? Because you didn't do the update. So let's look at another scenario, which is an open Wi-Fi network. You are at a coffee shop and you connect to their free Wi-Fi to check your email. You didn't think twice about using it because it's convenient. What you didn't know is that a hacker is sitting nearby also connecting to the same Wi-Fi. The malicious attacker can see all the data being sent over the network, including your user's name, your passwords, and other sensitive information. So sometimes we go to Starbucks and we connect to their internet, their free Wi-Fi. Sometimes we're at the airport and we connect to their free Wi-Fi because it's convenient and it's fast. We get that. But remember, you are not the only person that is nearby connecting to that network. There are malicious attackers who are close by on that network trying to find data coming through the network that they can steal. What is the threat here? The threat is man in the middle attack, right? So the threat here is a man in the middle attack where the hacker or the malicious attacker intercepts the data between your device and the Wi-Fi router to steal sensitive information. So you always have to be mindful that you are not the only person that is on the network, but there are other people on the network that are malicious. What's the vulnerability in this scenario? Using public Wi-Fi without protection. That's the vulnerability. So the vulnerability is that you are using an unencrypted public Wi-Fi network without any protection like a VPN. Public networks are often unsecure, making it easier for attackers or hackers to eavesdrop on your communication. And sometimes when you are signing on to a network that is public, they will tell you that this is not a secure network. How many of you have seen that, where when you're trying to log on onto a public network, a public Wi-Fi, it says that this is not secure? And that is simply indicating to you that anything right now is possible, because there are many persons that are traveling. Malicious attackers go out just to steal information, right? So you have to be mindful that if you are not using a protected Wi-Fi, that you are prone to be vulnerable. Okay, do we get that? Okay, let's move on to the next scenario. Weak password scenario. You have an online account with a social media platform. For convenience, you use the same password you created years ago. And it's something simple like 12345 6, or your pet name. A malicious attacker, knowing that many people use simple password, tries this on your account and gain access, right? So what's the threat here? Password guessing or brute force attack. That is the threat. Now you got to understand that you cannot be reusing and using weak passwords. You're setting up yourself, because these malicious attackers, they are going to try combinations of passwords that they know individuals will use. And so that's why we encourage strong password that have numbers and characters and all of those, right? So the threat is password guessing or brute force attack. This is where the malicious attacker or hacker use techniques like guessing, brute forcing, or exploiting common passwords to break into your account. So you got to make sure that your password is strong. That even when the malicious attackers are trying brute force, that they are not able to get into your system. So the vulnerability in this scenario of the weak password is weak or reuse passwords, right? Weak or reuse passwords. That is the vulnerability. So when you are constantly using the same password on many devices in different platforms and using simple passwords, remember that malicious attackers can use brute force, which is trying different passwords to get into your system. So let's look at some multiple choice as it relates to what we just talked about. So we talk about vulnerabilities and we talk about threats, right? So now you should have a good understanding of what is threats and what is vulnerabilities. So let's look at some multiple choice to help to stimulate your mind, okay? So number one, which of the following best describe vulnerability in cybersecurity? Do you remember what we said vulnerability is? It has to do with weakness in a system. A, is it an external threat targeting a system? Is it B, a weakness in a system that could be exploited by an attacker? You should get that. Is it C, a virus infecting a network? Or is it D, a security measure implemented to protect a system? Number two, what is the main difference between a threat and vulnerability? A threat is a potential danger, while vulnerability is an actual attack. B, a threat is a possibility of an exploit, while vulnerability is a weakness that can be exploited. You should be able to come up with the answer by now. C, a vulnerability is a security measure, while threat is a potential danger. D, there is no difference between threat and vulnerability, and there is a difference between them. Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is an example of physical vulnerability in a network? Physical vulnerability in a network. Is it A, weak encryption protocol, B, an unsecure access points, C, outdated firewall rules, D, lack of employee training on phishing? Number 4, which of the following is an example of social engineer threats? Is it A, malware infecting a server, B, phishing email attempting to steal sensitive information? We talked about that earlier. C, a weak password policy, and D, a open network port vulnerability. You got to choose the one that you think is the best answer. Number 5, which type of threat is characterized by a large scale attack on an organization network, such as distributed denial of service attack? Is it inside threat, environmental threats, external threats, or social engineer? Which type of threat is characterized by a large scale attack on organization network? And if you go back to the slide previously, you will see where I had distributed um this you see that I had the distributed denial of service there, the DDoS, right? And some short answers here that will help you. Um, it said define threat and provide example of external threat that could affect a company's IT infrastructure. We did talk about that, that there are different threats that can affect the organization infrastructure, and explain what it means by vulnerability in the context of cybersecurity and give example of a software vulnerability. What is a zero-day vulnerability and why is it considered particularly dangerous? Discuss the difference between um, different vulnerability and exploitation. And then you're going to look at how human error can contribute to system vulnerability and provide examples of those, okay? And then I did throw in some true and false for the same concept, threats and vulnerability. And these are just some true and false. A vulnerability always requires an active threat in order to cause harm to a system. Is it true or false? Cybersecurity patches and updates are essential for mitigating threat, but may not always resolve underlying vulnerability. Is it true or false? An insider threat involves someone from outside. So listen to this question. An insider threat involves someone from outside an organization attempting to steal or damage data. So you got to determine whether or not that is true or that is false. Social engineering attacks rely on exploiting human behavior rather than technical vulnerability. Is that true or is it false? A vulnerability scan is an automated tool used to identify potential threats in a network. Is that true or is that false? So what you could actually do is to go back and read those slides, and you can also do additional reading that will help you to gain a better understanding of the topic. There are lots of information out there. So the next thing that we're going to be looking at this morning is the CIA triad. Very important in the cybersecurity world. These are key terminology that you must have in your vocabulary as you progress through the course. So we're going to look at confidentiality, and this is the pillars of cybersecurity, CIA triad. Confidentiality. So when we talk about confidentiality, whether in the world of cybersecurity or in another world, we're saying that we're ensuring that sensitive information is accessed only by authorized individuals. What are we saying about confidentiality? We are saying sensitive information must be accessed only by authorized individuals. So let me bring you a point. If you are working in Amazon, remember on Amazon there are large amount of storage for customers information, customers data. Now Amazon have to create a system, an encrypt system, and also a control mechanism to secure the confidentiality of those information, that no one that is not authorized cannot gain access to those information, because we know the danger it will have and or the impact that that will have. Let's say that there is a crime scene, the detective goes out and they collect information from the crime scene. They have to make sure that the information they collected from the crime scene, that those are kept confidential and only accessed by authorized individuals, right? They have to keep it. And it's the same thing in the banking industry, it's the same thing in the medical industry. Information, sensitive information, must be accessed only by authorized individual. Otherwise, we can have chaos. So let's look at some example of threat. We can have data breach where hackers can steal personal data from a company's database, and eavesdropping. All of these are threat to confidentiality, intercepting communication between a client and a server. And that's why we do pen testing. That's why we do encryption. That's why we do extra layers of protection. That is to protect the confidentiality of data and the possibility of any breach in the system. Okay, so let's look at some confidentiality scenarios. Let's look at scenario one of confidentiality. Sawa works into a market department at a company that handles sensitive client data. So it said that Sarah, she works in a marketing department at a company that handles sensitive client data. She often needs to send email containing client details to other team members. One day, she sent an email with a client personal information, right? She sent an email with client's personal information, but accidentally it was sent to the wrong email address. What could have been prevented here in terms of confidential? If Sarah had used an email encryption, the information in the email would have been unreadable to anyone who was not authorized to view it, even if the email ended up in the wrong hands. I don't know how many of you, sometimes when you do labs and some information, sometimes I know the passport office does it, and I know some place does that too. When they send you the information, they lock it and send it to you, and then they have to provide, you have to think there's a way that you have to get a particular or use something that is about you to open it, right? So I remember when I got this email once, and when I couldn't open the email, and then the lady said to me, "Use your date of birth." That means that if you are not the original recipient of this authorized information, you will never be able to get into it, because they didn't give me the password. They tell me to use something about me to open to open the document. So if she had encrypted the information, the email, even though it gets into the wrong hand, it would be readable by the unauthorized person. So let's look at another scenario. Encryption in action. Sarah works at a bank and handles customer accounts. One day, she needs to send a customer account detail to another branch. Instead of sending the information in regular email, which could be easily intercepted, Sarah used encryption. She encrypts the email, so even if someone tries to access it, they couldn't read the information without a special key. So when you have that special key, only you alone can open the information. Lesson: encryption is essential to protect sensitive information when it is transmitted over the network or internet, right? So you need to make sure that your information is encrypted, and later on in the course you will learn how to do encryptions, right? So information don't get into the wrong person's hand, even though you may accidentally send the information. Let's look at another scenario. Access control in a school database, right? We talked about access control earlier. Alex is an administrator at a school, and his job is to manage the student records, including grades, medical information, and contact details. The school has a system where teachers can access student grade, but only the principal can view medical record and contact details. So in many organizations, they do this access control, and that is where sometimes you will realize that there are certain documents that you can access on a company system, and there are times when there are information that you just cannot access because you don't have the right to that information, because they made the system so you only access information you are authorized to, because the other information are confidential. They are medical records and other stuff. So sometimes you can only put in the grades, but you can see the medical history of the students. You can't see anything else. The lesson is access control is important to ensure only the right people have access to the right information. Confidentiality. Only the right people have access to the right information. All of this is confidentiality. And so, even in a banking system, you will understand that there are certain high level bankers that can access all information, and the lower level tellers cannot access some information. And this is what we call access control, because we don't want the tellers to be able to access clients information, right? Their other information. So the sysadmin or the CEO, they give you limited access to information, right? Because people are careless. And many times we hear in the public that, listen, there's a data breach, there are information out there from the company about employees, about their identities and all of that. How did that breach happen? Sometimes it's just one employee who should not have the access to the system, got access, and they leak the information. Sometimes it's malicious attackers, right? So let's look at another scenario: protecting bank account information. John received a phone call from someone who claims to be from his bank. The caller asks for his bank account number, and password to verify his identity. What is the lesson here? Sensitive information such as a bank detail should never be shared over phone or email unless you are sure of the identity of the person requesting it, because all of these are confidential information that we don't want to share with the general public, right? Or people who are not authorized to get that information. So let's go through the multiple choice for this one. What is sensitive information? Is it A, public information available to everyone? Is it B, data that needs to be protected due to its confidential nature? Is it C, information that is not useful? Is it D, none of the above? So we said, we talk about confidentiality, and we said these are data that needs to be protected due to its confidential nature, okay? Which of the following is an example of encryption? And we said if the information is encrypted, even if it gets into the wrong hand, the wrong hands, they cannot use it because it's encrypted, or they cannot read it. So, which of the following is an example of encryption? Writing a letter in clear handwriting, turning data into secret code that only authorized people can read. C, locking a computer with a password. D, sharing password with a friend. And we know that encryption is all about turning data into code that only authorized people can read it, right? So nobody else can read that email because it's encrypted. Nobody else can read that document because it's encrypted in code. And only if you have a key, you can read it. Okay, next question. What is the main purpose of access control mechanism? It is A, to prevent unauthorized people from accessing sensitive information. Is it B, to store information in the cloud server? Is it C, to make information publicly available? Is it D, to encrypt information? And we know the answer would be A because we said it's to prevent unauthorized people from accessing sensitive information. Remember, we talked about the database and the school teacher, and that the school teacher can only access the grade, but they cannot access the student contact, and they cannot access the student medical information. All of that is access control, right? Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is an example of secure storage practice? That is a bonus that you can look upon. And it is A, leaving the document in an open drawer, storing file on an encrypted computer. C, sharing your password with a friend. D, writing your password on a sticky note. And we know that it is storing file on an encrypted computer, right? So that's we're securing our storage. And many organizations have to do this because malicious actors are always looking for ways to get into your data storage, right? Get into your database, get into your cloud, get into your server, whatever. They're always, so you have to encrypt it, right? Okay. Next question. Why is it important to protect sensitive information? Is it A, to ensure information is kept secret from everyone? B, to prevent identity theft, financial loss, and privacy breaches? C, to make it easy for anyone to access the data. D, none of the above. So we say that it is to prevent identity theft, financial loss, and privacy breach, right? So that's why we protect sensitive information, because in fact, if you don't protect your social security, somebody else can use it and steal your identity. It's the same thing with your driver's license. If you don't protect your financial information, people can go into your account and they can wipe it out. They can breach your data and they can steal all your information. That's why it's important to protect sensitive information. That's why a lot of you have a password on your computer. Have you ever thought, why do I put a password on my computer? Why do I do it? It's because you're trying to protect sensitive information. You don't want your information to get into the wrong hand, right? So you are protecting your information from malicious individuals. So today we learn about confidentiality, right? Keep everything protected. Keep your confidential information protected. If you are doing a pen testing on a system, you have to keep the information you gather during the pen testing confidential and only ensure that it gets into the hands of the right stakeholders and other people who are part of the organization. So you would not do a pen test on a system and give the information to the lower level employee. You have to make sure that all those information you gather while you are doing the pen testing, that it don't get out there in the hands of unauthorized people. So you must keep it confidential. That's why we're saying confidentiality in data is very important. Nobody wants to know that their information is out there. That's why we never get the secret of Coca-Cola. Have you ever wondered why? Coca-Cola have never given their secret of what they used to make their drink, right? Because those information are kept confidential. And I'm sure it's only high level individual have that secret, not even the employees. High level individuals, right? Because they so set it that you don't know the information. Everybody's trying to protect their sensitive data from getting into the wrong hands. Okay? The next one, which is a part of the CIA triad, is integrity. So let's look at integrity. Integrity in this context refer to keeping data accurate, complete, and secure. So integrity in the context of data means keeping your data accurate, complete, and secure. When we talk about data integrity, we mean that the information in a system should not be changed or tampered with without permission. It must stay correct and it must stay unmodified from its original form. Now, we are in a world where people tend to tamper with videos, tampered with paper. And let me bring you this scenario. If a FBI goes on a crime scene and pick up the information, that's why they tape off the area many times. You know why they're doing that? They are trying to preserve the integrity of the scenery, the integrity of the information that they will gather from that spot. And it's the same thing with our data. We want to make sure the data that we put in the system, that that data has integrity, that it is not modified, right? That it is secure. Because if you go in the system and you modify that information, it is no longer good. It no longer carries any integrity to it because it would have been modified, right? It is not correct. So we're saying integrity is keeping the data accurate, complete, and secure. What would be the use of collecting the crime scene information and then when you get to the place, you realize the labs or wherever, this information was tampered with? So let's look at some example of integrity controls. Data corruption, right? Threats. Malware changes data on a computer server. That can happen. Malicious malware can be injected, can be deployed to your system, and it can corrupt your entire data and change it on the server, right? Man in the middle attack. An attacker intercept and modify the data being transferred. This can happen. And so when this kind of threat happen is distort your data so it has no integrity. So our data must be preserved in such a way that the integrity of it, when it's ready to be used, is accurate. Let's look at some integrity scenarios. You are shopping online and decide to buy a new phone, right? You added the phone to your shopping cart, but when you checked out, the total price seems wrong. What's the problem? You realize that the online store system shows an incorrect price due to a system glitch. This is a data integrity issue because the price display was wrong, which could lead to confusion or incorrect payment. So the information that they present is wrong. The displayed information was wrong. That's an integrity issue. The solution that we could give to this to prevent this from happening, the website should implement data validation to ensure that price are correctly listed and that customers are charged the right amount. They should also regularly check their system for errors and use a backup system to store data accurately, right? So that's what they could do. Let's look at another scenario. School grading book. Imagine You are a student checking your final grades online and you notice your grades for one subject is incorrect. Instead of receiving a B, it says D. The problem here, the grade was changed by accident when the teacher entered into the system. This is a data integrity problem because the grade is incorrect, which could affect your overall academic record. Solution that we could give to this integrity problem: to prevent this, the school should ensure only authorized staff can change grades, and they should implement a data validation to check for errors. And there should also be an audit trail to track who made the change and when, so the mistake can be traced and corrected. So the solution to integrity problem is that only ensure that it's authorized individual that is handling this information. Do you get that? Are we all on target? Do we get that? I'm going to give you a break shortly. So we get that. So we ensure that. So let's look at another scenario. Bank account information. This is another integrity information that we're talking about, right? So I'm giving you the scenarios that can help you to better understand the concept of integrity. You log into your online bank account and see that your balance is much lower than expected after checking. You realize that there was a withdrawal made that you didn't authorize. The problem here, someone unauthorized might have accessed your account and change your balance. This is a serious data integrity issue because your account data has been tampered with, right? Unauthorized person gain access and change your information. That's an integrity problem. The solution that we could give to this is the bank can use encryption to protect your account information and ensure that unauthorized users cannot access or change your data. They can also set up strong password protection, multi-factors authentication, and regular checks for any suspicious activity. They can put all of this in place to ensure the integrity of your information and their information is preserved. Another one, an employee payroll system. An employee noticed that their paycheck amount is incorrect this month. It turns out the system mistakenly add an extra bonus payment that wasn't supposed to be there. The problem, payroll system has a data integrity problem because the payment information was incorrect, potentially causing confusion and error in employees' paycheck. What could they have done? The company should use a data validation to deduct and to not deduct but to data validation to double check payment rate bonus. So the solution, the company should use a data validation to double check pay rates, bonus and deduction before processing payments, right? And they can also keep backup records of payroll data in case any changes are made, right? Or any review needs to be made. So they must have a backup system. Since there was a glitch in the payment system, they also need to have some backup. So let's go through the multiple choice question. Do you have any question? Is there anything? I've given you all the scenarios there are. And in terms of integrity, we got, when it comes on to logs and all of those things, we have to make sure we're going to talk about logs and all of that to make sure that individual don't get in and modify the logs, modify the information and the system. We're going to be talking about that too, right? So let's look at some multiple choice as it relates to integrity. And remember again that integrity is a part of the CIA triad. It is one of the pillar of the cybersecurity, right? What does data integrity ensure? What integrity ensure? Is it A, data is stored in the cloud, Is it B, data is accurate and secure? Is it C, data is deleted regularly? Is it D, data is shared with everyone? And we said that integrity is all about data is accurate and secure. So data is all about accuracy and secured, right? So we'll put B for the answer. Which of the following is an example of maintaining data integrity? Which of the following is an example of maintaining data integrity? Is it A, allowing everyone to access your personal data? B, checking data for errors before it is entered into a system? Is it C, deleting all record without permission? Is it D, ignoring the system security update? And to maintain data integrity, remember we said we are checking data to for errors before it is entered into the system. So we're trying to do everything to ensure whatever information we're entering in the system, that the information is accurate. Let's move on to the other aspect of the multiple choice. What does encryption help to protect? Is it data by making it readable to everyone? Is it data by making it unreadable to unauthorized people? Is it data by storing it in a secure location? Data by making it publicly accessible. And we know that encryption, as we talked about earlier, is making the data unreadable to unauthorized people, right? So we remember that one. Encryption is all about making it unreadable to unauthorized individuals. What is audit trail? Remember when we talk about the grades, first the school grade, and we said that there should be a system where you can track who went in and change the grade, or who went in and do any modification of the integrity of the information or of the data. That is what we call an audit trail. Is is it a list of people who have access to the data? Is it B, record of who changed the data and when? Is it C, a system for creating data backups? Is it D, a process to validate data? And we know that when it comes on to audit trail, it's talking about a record of who changed the data and when. If you remember clearly, I said earlier that one of the things that they could use to find out who changed the grade, who had the wrong amount of money on the paycheck. There is an audit trail that is there. It tells who and when. Do we get that? Are we clear on that point? So to the hour, I will give you a 20 minutes break, but we're going to go to the hour. When we reach at 9, then I'll give you a 20 minutes break. So let's move on to the other concept, which is availability. Availability of information. Availability. So when we talk about availability, right? In the world of computer and data, availability is referring to making sure that the system, application, and data are available whenever people need to use it, that is the authorized individual. Whenever authorized users need to use them. This means that users should be able to log into a website, access file, or use an app without interruption or delay. So availability, again, in the world of computer and data, it's making sure that the system, application, and data are available, they're accessible whenever authorized users need them. All right, so of what purpose would it be that Amazon store all of these data and then authorized individuals cannot access them when they need them? It will be of no use. So we need to make sure that authorized individuals are able to gain access to the data when they need it to. When they need to log in, that they can access the information. So let's look at some examples of availability, right? And a lot of time you probably see this around you, you probably know it, but sometimes we're not thinking that this has to do with availability. A financial institution's online banking system experienced a DDoS attack that overwhelms its server, causing users to be unable to access their account for several hours, potentially leading to financial loss and reputation damage. Right? So that's a problem because no one was able to access their information the time they needed. It wasn't available. And DDoS is can overwhelm the system, right? The server where many people sending requests to the server until it crash. And so the person who needs to access the system cannot access it. That's just a simpler terminology, right? So the person could not access the system when they needed it. And that can be a big problem. Sometimes you're trying to get on a particular website and you're getting some form of error. You're trying to log into your account, you can't for days, for hours, you can't access anything. That is a problem with availability. It's not available to the authorized person. So you are the authorized individual, but you can access the information. And that is a problem. Does everyone understand that concept of availability? Are there any question on availability? So we have to make sure, that's why company have to make sure that there are backup, right? There are backups plans that they have. There are recovery plans that they have in place just in case a server is overwhelmed by DDoS so that the end users can get the information when they need to get the information. So let's look at some ways to ensure availability. Availability server. Use multiple servers that can back each other, right? That can back up each other in case one fail. So we have must have available servers. So not only one, but several people, places like Amazon, places like these giant companies that running out there, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, they have to have some other backup server just in case one fails. Because if the system fails, nobody will be able to log in. Nobody will be able to do any video call. And it's the same thing with the phone companies. It's the same thing with the internet providers. All of these, they have to have backups, right? So if one system fails, there's always another. Regular backup checks is important. So we have regular backing up of data so that if something is lost, it can also be restored. So we have to back up our data again. So if there is a problem, they can be restored. If there's a natural disaster, they can be restored because you have backup system. Redundant power source, having more than one power source to avoid disruption if one source fails. That is also important. And these major companies, hospitals, I could imagine, and these kind of places that are central, they have to have backup power system because many of their equipment and surgeries and all of those, they have to do with power, right? And computers. And so all of these places, it's important that they have some backup system just in case there's a power outage. They got to have backup just in case their system go down, right? To know what medicine to give their patient. I don't know if you remember the WannaCry attack that happened and that took down the entire system. Uh, there wasn't any surgery that was able to done. It affected so many people. Did they have a backup system? I guess some places did. They have some kind of backups that they were able to look to. And another thing to ensure availability is that we have to have a disaster recovery plans. These plans ensure that the business or service can quickly recover and get back online in the event of a failure. So availability is important. So we put all of these concepts into practice so that if anything should happen, we are not at a loss. We are not trying to sit down wondering, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? The system fails, this fails, that fails. No, because we have system and stuff in place that will deal with the loss. Okay? Or whatever is happening in the system. Do you understand that concept? So we must at all time ensure that these are practiced to prevent information not available. We must find ways to ensure availability. We must at all time do put the plans in place. And many of you, as you go out there and you're working in cybersecurity spaces, they are going to ask you sometimes to work on their team and you know implementing different ways to ensure if there's a system outage, if there's a problem, that they're going to need your level of expertise in how we can ensure that this don't happen again. That a customer don't call and said, I can't log in. The system is failing. I'm getting some form of system error. Right? Or sometimes you go into an organization and they have all of these plans in place and it's just for the employees to maintain them. And you have to know these concepts. Or you may be employed in a business that is just starting up. What about being employed in a business and that business is just starting up? And because they're just starting, you have to come up with ways in which the company can um, in, prevent unavailable information, or ways that the company must prevent threats, or ways that the company can um, reduce vulnerabilities, are ways that the company must keep their information confidential. So these information are going to be helping you in the long run, because now you have a clear idea. What can my company do to protect the confidentiality of the information? And you would be the one to just come up with those information because you learned them in this class. I give you several scenarios and then you can go and research and you can think so you can be of an asset to a company. Well, you hear customer calling in saying that they can't get into the system, that their services down. What can you do as the cybersecurity person to enhance this business? Well, you said you write a plan out, you go to manager, you write a plan out, you said, well, this is the way we can ensure that information and the system is available. This is the way we can prevent hackers from coming in again. This is the way that we can prevent our information from getting in into unauthorized person. This, well, the email address about the company product, it went to the wrong company. Oh my God, that's a disaster. How can we prevent this? You know you can use encryption, right? Because you learn it in this class. You learn there are ways that you can use to protect information. So now you're going to use your level of knowledge to help improve that organization system, right? So that's why, and employers rather, love when employees are knowledgeable about what they are doing. So you're going to put those into practice, right? Another scenario that we can look at is streaming service, right? So I'm just going to go through a part of it before we go on a 20 minutes break because we've been running. streaming service like Netflix and YouTube, right? You want to watch your favorite TV show on a streaming service. But when you try to load the video, the website is down. This is a disaster. It's frustrating because you can't access the content you want. What really is the problem? The website or the server is unavailable due to severe issues which impact the user's experience. This is lack of availability. Whenever time you are trying to get onto a system and the system is unavailable, that is lack of availability. And this is a problem. So you're trying to watch your favorite show on a streaming service, but when you try to load the video, the website is down. That's not good. Is that good? No, none of us want to know that we went on a website and the website is down. We want to know that all information are available to us at the time. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to give you a break. We're going to go on a 20 minutes break because we'll be running. As a matter of fact, let it be a 30 minutes break, right? Because you guys have been running for 1 hour now. So I'm going to mute my phone, or I'm just going to mute my so I'm going to share my 30 minutes timer screen, okay? Well, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back from your 30 minutes break, and we're going to continue. And that would be the biggest break you have, I believe. The other breaks are going to be shorter, okay? So we're going to have shorter breaks in between, okay? So let's go. So let's go, let's go, let's go. So before we went on a break, we were talking about the Netflix. We're still on availability, okay? So we talked about Netflix and we did say that what happened with Netflix was that their service platform could not be accessed, and we said that is a problem with availability. So let's move on. The next scenario that we're going to look at as it relates to availability, we're going to look at online banking, right? So let's look at it. You try to check your bank balance online, but the website is unavailable. You need to transfer money urgently, but the bank system is down. The problem, the online banking system isn't accessible, right? It's not accessible when needed, causing inconvenience. This is a problem with availability. You have to remember that. It is a problem with availability. Solution to the problem: the bank could use redundant system to ensure the website is always up. Additionally, they could set up a backup power source to avoid downtime due to power issues and have a disaster recovery plan to restore service quickly. Remember, before we went on break, we talk about all of these redundancy to ensure the website is always up. We talk about backup power source to ensure that there's no downtime. So if there is a problem, that it is quickly resolved, right? And then the disaster recovery plan is if there is any problem, there can be restoring a service quickly. And this is going to be applicable in your place of work when you are out there as an employee or as a person on the cybersecurity team. You're going to have to put things in place that will ensure that the system downtime is reduced as much as possible. And so you probably have to give your input into how that can work. So let's look at some multiple choice questions as it relates to availability. So the first question is, what does availability ensure in a system? What we said it ensure that service is always available, it's accessible, right? So let's go through it. A, system are only accessible to authorized users during working hours. B, system and data are accessible when needed by authorized users. C, data is backed up in case of system failure. D, system are only available or accessible to administrator. And so we will put B for the answer. The system and data are accessible when needed by authorized users. So we have to ensure that it is available and that it is accessible by authorized users when needed. Next question, which of the following ensures that a system can continue operating when one server fails? Remember we talked about that? So if a server fails, you must have some other system in place. Is it A, high uptime? Is it B, redundancy? Is it C, password protection? Is it D, data encryption? I deliberately left that answer out so you can fit it in because we talk about it. We talk about all of those that will prevent downtime. We did. Let's go to the next question. What is a disaster recovery plan used for? We talked about that. We said disaster recovery plan is used for a specific purpose in an organization. Is it A, to keep system accessible at all times? B, recover data and restore service quickly after a failure? C, to encrypt users' data D, to prevent unauthorized access. And we know that we use recovery plans to recover data and restore service quickly after a failure. So sometimes you may find a system fail, but in no time the system is up. That means they have something, some disaster recovery plan in place to restore service, right? Let's move on. Which of the following can help ensure high availability of a system? That there is no problem with the system. That's what we're talking about when we said high availability. There is no problem in the system, right? It's available. We're trying to make sure that it is highly available to the end user. Is it A, using one server for all service? B, regular updating of software? Is it C, using multiple servers that can back each other up? Is it D, allowing everyone to access the system? And we know that we use high availability by you ensuring high availability by using multiple servers that can back up each other. So if one fail, we have one. If another fail, we have another one. So we use these high availability to ensure that we are able to get on the system when we need to get on the system. All of that is very important. Okay, let's look at the other one. If a social media platform is down for hours, what is the issue? What will be that? Right? Is it availability? Is it accuracy? Is it integrity? Is it security? And we know that is a problem of availability. That will be a big problem with availability. Right? So we are finished with availability, and now we are going over to non repudiation and authentication. Now, this is very interesting because you're going to learn here some concepts, right? That you might think like, oh, I didn't know that's what it's called. Oh, I didn't know that. So let's look at non-repudiation. What are we talking about when we said non-repudiation? We are saying non-repudiation is a principle that ensures that once a user has performed an action, such as sending a message, signing a document, or making a transaction, they cannot deny having done it. So that's non repudiation. So these are systems that are in place that if you went on the accounting file and changed it, or you logged onto the system, you cannot deny that you logged onto the system because there are evidence, there are logs, there are things in place that prove that you did, right? They cannot deny having done it. It means that the person or system that did something is clearly identified and cannot dispute it later. So it does mean that the person or system that did something is clearly identified and cannot be disputed later. So it is clearly identified. It's clearly identify you that you logged onto the system. It clearly identify you that you did an authentication, you got onto it, and you made a change. It clearly um it clearly shows that you were the one that went into that account because there's a log, there's something to show that you did the transaction. You and I did the transaction. So if I went and I did something, it shows that I did. Now, that's why many times people, I believe that's my opinion sometimes, that when a person file a claim that their credit card this or their credit, they ask you a lot of questions because sometimes they can go back and track non-repudiation that you did this, you agreed to this, you gave permission to it, you were the one, right? So you cannot dispute it later because the evidence are there. And these are some things that many organization, not only in cybersecurity, I believe that does these things to prove that the person is not speaking the truth because we have the evidence here. But also, we got to understand that these non-repudiation can also be tampered with, and we're going to learn about that. So let's look at authentication. Authentication is verifying the identity of a user or device. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't need to do authentication here because I'm going to do it elsewhere. So let's just stick with non-repudiation so you don't get confused when I get to authentication. So let's stick with non-repudiation. So let's move on. So let's look at non-repudiation threat inside fraud or manipulation of audit logs. Remember that we said non-repudiation is that there are clear identity or identification that the person did send, that did do the transaction. It is a way to ensure that you cannot dispute that you weren't the one. So inside fraud manipulation of audit log can interfere with the process, right? So it doesn't track back to you. So an inside threat pose a risk to non-repudiation by allowing individual with privilege to access and tamper with audit logs. Because in the audit logs is where you're going to find that you went into this, you did this transaction, you send this message. So if a person inside the organization have I privilege, they are sysadmin or assistant admin, or people that have I privileges, right? They can actually go in the log and they can change that log, right? And so they tamper with it. We call it tampering with the log. And so no one will find out. So let's say, for example, John is a sysadmin and Jane works in the organization and she had privilege. Just John gave her a lot of privilege, right? And Jane went on the system after she didn't do something wrong, right? She realized she did something right. She made a transaction wrong. She did send a message and she wants to say, it wasn't me. So what she can do, because she have privilege, she can go and change that log. She can tamper with the audit log. So it doesn't direct point back to her doing the transaction, if you understand. So let's look at an example. A system administrator manipulate logs to remove evidence of their unauthorized access to sensitive data, making it difficult to trace the breach and deny accountability for their action. So let's say that you work in, and another way that this can be done, sometimes you're working in an organization, you are disgruntled, and you probably want to sell the company's information, so you tampered with information. Because the CEO and other members of the organization will ask, they know that this information got out then, and so they call in these high-tech people and they start checking logs, they start checking other stuff, and because you have that privilege, you erase everything so they can see that it is you. So that's the reason sometimes a lot of people get away with stuff, because they know how to manipulate the system and change the data stamp, change time, change the log. They know how to do it so that it doesn't point back to them. So that's why a person would be in an organization and they're doing wrong for a long time, because they know how to manipulate the system. So this is what we're talking about. So it's not me. I didn't send it. And that employee said, I never sent it. And this one said, I didn't send it. Because somebody then went in and tampered with the audit log, right? Because they have the privilege. They were given privilege to get into the system. And so they mishandle their privilege to manipulate the system. So let's look at another non-repudiation scenario. You send an important email to your boss about a project update, right? Later, your boss claims that they never received the email. Here is non-repudiation. Here is a problem, non-repudiation. Your boss could deny receiving the email, but if email system record a timestamp log showing that the email was sent and received, it proves that the action took place. This is an example of non-repudiation. So you said you were supposed to send a message to alert everybody, don't come to work tomorrow. You send a message to alert everybody. Turn the system off tomorrow this time. We will be doing a maintenance on the system. We'll be doing a pen test on the system, back to cybersecurity world. And then the employee comes into work tomorrow or the same day, turn the system off, and department managers are giving instruction, and then everything is disrupted. Data is lost. Everybody is called into a meeting. What happened? Sis, let's say that your manager for your department are the main person who is responsible to send emails. Also, I did send an email to department managers. Your manager in your department said I didn't get the email, but they can prove in the log that the email was sent because it does have a timestamp. Even though your manager deny it, from the sender's end, they have a log of the information. I have in my company, I send email out all the time. And sometimes if clients say they didn't get the contract from me, I go back to my time log, into my email log, and I show them. That's non-repudiation. I did send it. There's a time. This is your email. This is where it went. I have everything, right? So it shows it. So you cannot deny it. And sometimes these are used as evidence in court against people. Because if they do a forensic or an investigation on your system, they will see you send email. So people sometimes are using systems and don't know exactly what they are doing because they are evidence that you did this, right? So we gotta be mindful when we are doing things on system because it keeps a log. There are ways to find out. Solution to this problem: to ensure non-repudiation, email system can include timestamps, digital signatures, and maintain logs that show when an action was performed and who performed that action. So it maintains all of that information. Are there any questions? So you understand now non-repudiation. So when you're out there, you be mindful. You're given privilege. Be careful of who you also give privilege in the organization because they can mess you up too as a sysadmin. If they have that privilege, they can go in and change something, and then sometimes you see like you see all of these scenarios sometimes. Why some people get you know fired because somebody then go in and change up something and point it to you and it wasn't you and you just cannot figure it out. Okay, it does happen. So let's look at some question multiple choice question as it relates to non-repudiation. What does non-repudiation guarantee in a digital transaction? What non-repudiation guarantee you? A, the action can be modified by the user after it's done. B, the users can deny having performed the action. C, the action is recorded and the user cannot deny it. D, the data is encrypted after the transaction. So the non-repudiation ensure, which will be C, the action is recorded and the user cannot deny it. Nobody can deny that they did it. Next question. Which of the following helps ensure non-repudiation in an email communication? Which of the following helps to ensure non-repudiation in an email communication? A, two-factors authentication. B, digital signatures. C, encryption. D, firewalls. It will be B, digital signature, right? Digital signature is the answer. So the next one we're going to look at is authentication. Authentication, right? So let's back up. Let me see if I have anything around here on what is no, that's authorization. So let's back up and go to authentication. So we did say we were going to come back to authentication. Authentication is verifying the identity of a user or device. This involves using methods like passwords, biometric, two-factor authentication, or a digital certificate. So when we are authenticating, and you see that all the time, when we are authenticating, we are verifying who you said you are, right? So sometimes many of you have that on your banking app. Some of you have that on your email. So it is a way to protect you and your data. So the system wants to know, is this you? So it does an authentication. Very important, because these days two-step authentication allows you to know who is signing in your system, because it's no longer a thing where you just sign in and that's it, but you sign in and it sends you an email or it sends you a text message. So you get a text message like, I'm not trying to log on to my Amazon account, and because you got that message on your phone, it alerts you, right? It alerts you that somebody is logging on to my email right now, right? So it helps that way. Let's look at threat. Credential stuffing, right, is a threat. Credential stuffing attacks involve using previous leaked users' name and password to gain unauthorized access to multiple accounts across different platforms. So if there was a credential leaking, then it's possible that malicious individual can use those to try and get into your system, bypassing authentication. Because if if your information is out there, then listen, malicious attackers know exactly what to do to get onto your system if the information is leaked. Example, an attacker used a large database of stolen credentials from a data breach to access several corporate accounts, compromising sensitive information and gaining control over critical systems, all because users reuse the same passwords across services. And that is a bad idea. It is a very bad idea when you use the same credential right across the system, especially reusing of information. Let's look at some scenario. You try log into your online account, right? The system asks for your username and password to confirm your identity. That is authentication. Problem, if you enter the wrong password, the system will deny you access because it couldn't verify that you are the rightful owner of the account. This process is authentication. That's why you get logged out to your account. That's why you have to go through different process of logging in when you get logged out, because it's trying to authenticate who you said you are. Solution, authentication should authentication system often use passwords, fingerprint, or even two-factor authentication, to confirm. Sometimes your passwords are your email to confirm your identity before granting you access. And that is very important. So never get mad at the system. I'm trying to log in. It's me, it's me, it's me. What they are trying to do is to protect you and to protect themselves as the organization as well, right? So they have to authenticate that it is you. So don't be mad. It's a way to protect you, your data, and your privacy. Because can you imagine if there wasn't any authenticated process and anybody could just jump onto your system? They could get onto your bank account, they could get onto your data, they could get into everything. Can you imagine if there wasn't any authentication? Then that's when you would be going crazy. It's like what's and calling these places, they have to pay back all of these things because no authentication. Right, so it's very important that when the system is trying to authenticate you, that you be patient. Don't be calling these people and arguing with them. Why I have to go through this? Why all of this? Trying to protect your identity and your data from getting into the wrong hands. So we have to authenticate you. And so these are some of the things as you work in the world of cybersecurity that you are going to be implementing in the organizations. And sometimes depends on who you work with. If it's a client and the client is calling you to help to do a certain job for them computer wise, then you'll have to help them set up all these things sometimes, or instruct them how to set it up. So let's look at some multiple choice questions for authentication. What is the main purpose of authentication? What is the main purpose? We talked about it just now, right? You got to be able to identify who you said you are. At the end of the day, that's authentication. So is it A, to determine what action a user can perform? Is it B, to verify the identity of a user? Is it C, track users' activity? D, monitor system performance. And we know the answer is B. It is to verify the identity of a user. So let's go to the next question. Which of the following is not a common form of authentication? Password, fingerprint scan, encryption key, retina scan. Encryption is never a part of authentication because encryption is sending messages in code. Remember that. But all the others are ways to authenticate you. That's why when you're going through the airport, they take your passport and they scan you. That's why when you're going through the airport, they tell you look into the camera. And there are different means of authenticating you, even to pass through the airport, to make sure it is you. And to also see if you're a terrorist. Right? Is that is it. So we have to make sure you are who you said you are, right? So let's look at um I don't know how I reach all the way down here, but that's not where I was meant. Okay, so in authentication, we got to be patient with the system, and we got to know the difference or the common authentication that are out there. So when you're seeing these things you are seeing them, but maybe you really didn't know that this was what was happening. It's very important that you know that the process of trying to verify who you said you are, that is what we call authentication. And we go through that so many times. So many times we go through authentication. You have to go through it when you are in a company's um in a particular company. You have to authenticate yourself because this is going to keep a log that you logged into, right? That it verifies you through different means, and you were the one that logs into the system. School system have that in place now. When you're trying to log onto Blackboard, that it authenticate you, you're trying to use the system is trying to authenticate you. It want to send you an email or it want to send you a message to your phone just to verify who you said you are. So I hope that this aspect of authentication, that you would have learned what is authentication. So now we're going to look at another aspect of another key concept in the CI in cybersecurity, and that is this is a concept, right, in cybersecurity that we must know. It's a part of the security fundamentals. Let's get that clear. Authorize. Authorization is the next one that we're going to look at. So we finished with authentication. Did we actually did the scenarios? Did we do the No, we didn't do the scenarios. No, no, no. Yes, we did. Uh, authentication. See, never get authentication and authorization mixed up. So we're going to look at authorization. So that's where we are. Authorization, on the other hand, is to determine what action or resource a user is allowed to access after they have been denied authenticated. After they have been authenticated, not denied, not denied, but have been authenticated. So after the system authenticate you, what action can you perform? What resource can you access, right? So authorization determine what action or resources a user is allowed to access after they have been authenticated. It specifies what you can and cannot do once you are verified. So not because you are authenticated into the system means that you can just pull into any file, you can just do any action. You are authenticated, but now you what are you authorized to do on the system, right? So it's a verifier. I get in, yes, EPIP hooray. But when I get in, what can I do and what I cannot do, right? That is authorization. So let's look at authorization threats. Privilege escalation. Privilege escalation occurs when an attacker or unauthorized user gain higher access right than they are authorized for, allowing them to access resources or perform an action that are beyond their intended permission. So that's privilege escalation. That's a threat. So if you get certain privilege, John, in an organization, the sysadmin give you certain privilege, that should be in your hands. You should get the privilege in the first place. So in Linux, we have some privileges, or when we're doing Linux, some privileges that people are given: read, write, and execute. Some people are given write only, some people are given read and write, but they can't execute. There are privileges that are given to us, but it should not be given because you are a threat to the organization information at that level. Because if you become disgruntled, it's possible that, hey, I can give this information out, or I can put the organization at risk. So it gets into the wrong hand of person who shouldn't get that privilege. Authorization, let's look at some scenario. After logging into your computer system, you can access your email, but you cannot access confidential financial reports. So even though you were authenticated to log on to the company system, now you are in the system. The only thing that you can do is read your email, but you cannot see John's financial report. You can see no financial information. You log on to the system, but you cannot do or view certain things because your authorization is limited. The problem here, this is an example of authorization in action. Although you can authenticate as a valid user, you are not authorized to access certain files due to your role. This is important in every organization. This is important. And why this is important is because you have some people that you really cannot give certain privileges. You cannot give them certain rights to information. They will destroy it. And so we have to make sure that even though everybody have to log to the same system, everybody doesn't have the same privilege. That's not your role. You don't need to see what finance is doing. You don't need to see what HR is doing. That's not your role. You don't need to see employee record. That's not your role. You need to stay in the HR department and doing what you're doing and leave financial and leave the other departments alone, or finance or whatever, right? Solution authorization is managed by setting permission for different users, where certain users, managers, for an example, can access more sensitive data, while others, regular employees, have more limited access. We got to do that. As a person in cybersecurity, you have to know this, that not everybody have the same privileges. And sometimes as a sysadmin or as a ethical hacker, you may be called in to get into the system of an organization. You are given certain privileges, certain information they may give you, they may release, and you have to know how to keep those information. That's why with the pen testing, you cannot give information to employees. You got to give it to people who are authorized to get that information, right? So let's look at some authorization questions that will help us to better understand authorization. What does authorization determine after authentication? Remember, you are able to authenticate and get into the system, but after you get into the system, then what? The, is it A, the identity of the user? Is it B, whether the user has the correct password they can access? D, how long the user can stay logged in? And so we put it for C. So authentication determine, authorization determine the permission that you can, the permission, it gives you permission and what you can access. So after authentication, it gives you permission and what you can access, okay? Which of the following is an example of authorization? Which of the following is an example of authorization? A, a system prompt a user for their user's name and password. B, a user is allowed to access only financial report after logging in. C, a user's password is checked by the system. D, a system logs out a user after 15 minutes of inactive. And we said it is B. An example of authorization is a user is allowed to access only the financial report after logging in. That is authorization. Now we're going to go to accounting. Accounting, and when we talk about accounting, we're not talking about the accounting that you know. We're not talking about the accounting that you know, where you do financial reports and all of that, right? Accounting is a concept in cybersecurity. It's a part of the security fundamentals that we're learning today. Okay? So, accounting refers to the process of tracking users' activity on a system. So, the accounting refers to the process of tracking a user's activity on a system. It logs what actions were performed, by whom, and when. This helps an organization understand how their systems are used and monitored and they monitor for unusual unauthorized activity. So in the accounting, and I'm telling you like this, there is a log, there is a track of activity, who did it and when it was done. Unless you have some insiders with privilege that can tamper with this accounting log, there is a log, right? So it tracks every activities, who and when. Let's look at it. Log tampering. An attacker may attempt to manipulate or erase log files to hide their malicious activities or to avoid detection. This renders audit trails useless, making it difficult to perform a proper post-incident investigation or complicate or compliance check. So it's complicate the system. So what you did or what happened can be that's a threat. When you go in the system and you tamper with that log file, you erase just to hide yourself, that's a problem because you're trying to avoid being detected, right? So it's important, it is important that all of these are taken into consideration and that these can happen. You got people who manipulates the system, good at manipulating the system. So accounting, let's look at some scenarios. A company system track when employee logs in and out, what file they access, and what action they perform during their shifts. All of this is log guys. It monitors you. That's why if something happen, you can't say it's you because there's a log file. Not you don't only clock in, but there's a log file of what you did when you went on the system and what time and when. Problem if an employee access confidential file without permission, the system accounting features, so listen, the system accounting features can detect the unusual behavior and it can alert the system administrators. So sometimes they have features on the system that will alert sysadmin because sysadmin is the person who sets up all of these on the platform. So if you go there and you're trying to do unusual things on there, it alerts sysadmin that you are. So, and then according to a system, a card accounting system, really, they keeps detailed log of actions and event, which can be retrieved to monitor for security breaches and to ensure compliance with company policies. We got to do that. That has to be done. So it keeps a detailed log of actions and events. So that's it. Whatever you do, there's a record of the events, right? And it helps the organization because we want to ensure that you are in compliance with the company policy. If you were trained and you were told that there are certain things you don't do in this organization and you're trying to do it anyhow, and then you got caught because system admin is alert that you're trying to alter some information here, you're getting into spaces you shouldn't have gotten into the first place, and you were warned. They warned you. Okay, so let's look at accounting multiple choice questions. What is the purpose of accounting in cybersecurity? We said what we keep logs, right? When and how and who. When, how, and who. Is it A, to monitor which user are accessing the system? B, to log the action of a user and track their activities? C, to ensure data is encrypted during transmission? D, to prevent unauthorized access to the system. And we know that accounting is there to log action of users and track their activities. So the next time you go back to work, the next time um, if you're not working to get a job, your action and what you do on the system has a log. Okay? Next question. Which of the following is an example of accounting in security system? Which of the following is an example of accounting in security system? A, firewall blocking unauthorized access. B, a log of all users, a log of all users logins and file access event. C, an antivirus program detecting malware. D, password verification system. And we said it will be B because it's a log of all users log and file access events. Now we are down to security control categories. Security control categories. That's where we are at. So let's go. Security control categories is a part of security fundamentals. So when we talk about security control categories, we're saying administrative controls. These are policies, procedures, guidelines that regulate the security practice of any organization. Example of these administrative control may include security awareness training, access control point, access control policies, and incident response plans. All of these are in place so that there's some level of balance in the organization. And then the next category is technical control. Security mechanism implemented within the system and network. So when you talk about technical control in a system, you're going to hear it: firewall, intrusion detection, encryption tools, antivirus software. So technical controls, this is what we're talking about: security control categories. We have the administrative aspect, we have the technical aspect, and then we have the physical aspect, physical control. So administrative control, technical controls, and physical controls. So if somebody say, what are the security control categories? They are administrative, they are technical, and they are physical. In the administration, there are policies, there are training, there are incident response. All of this tells you in the administrative what to do in the event of, and that you are trained. So I trained you about organization policies and procedure, what you get into, what you don't get into. So there's awareness, there's training. And the technical aspect of it now is a firewall, the intrusion, the encryption tool, and the antivirus. The physical control aspect of it now is measure you take to protect the physical assets, such as server, data center, network equipment. It may include locks and security cameras, security guards, environmental control. All of these things are part of the security control. Why are we doing the security control? To prevent our information from being out there. We're doing all that it takes. So remember, this is security control categories. There are three security control: administrative control, technical control, and physical control. Do you understand that? And when we talk about administrative control, we're talking about awareness and training. We're talking about access control policies. In the access control policies, we get certain level of privileges or authority to view certain document. Incident response plan, what to do in the event of a disaster, or what to do in an event if the system is down. Technical control, we're trying to prevent our network and our organization. So we are putting things in place like firewall, intrusion detection, encryption tools, and antivirus software. All of these are going to make sure that our system, our server, our network is safe. Then we have the physical place. Now it's that our physical building where we keep all of these assets, right? So we're protecting our physical assets. Okay. So the next time you are in an organization, or if you are in one now, it will make sense of the control of the security control categories. So let's look at some security control category scenarios. The threats: lack of defense in depth. So let's look at this. A lack of comprehensive security control across multiple categories, preventative, detective, corrective, and deterrence, expose an organization to great risk. A single type of control might be bypassed by an attacker. So that's why we need so many different layers, because a single one, you may put in a firewall, but you don't put in any intrusion detection. So that can be bypassed, right? Example, an organization only implement a preventative measure like a firewall but neglected detective controls such as intrusion detection, right? System, IDS. As a result, an attacker bypassed the firewall. There is no mechanism in place to detect or respond to the attack, resulting in data breach. Okay? Security control categories. Security control categories. Let's look at some scenarios. What are security control categories? We talk about them. Security control categories are measures taken to safeguard the system and data. So while we are doing security control categories, it is there to safeguard the system and the data. This slide should have probably, this remark should have probably been in the other slide, but it's okay as it is. Security control categories are measures to safeguard the system and data. These control can be categorized in three types, right? Preventative, detective, and corrective. In the preventative control, measure that stop a security breach before it happened. Detective, measure that will detect and alert when a security breach is happening. Intrusion detection system. Corrective control, measure that fix or recover from security breaches. Okay, so there are three. They are in there. They fall into three categories: preventative, detective, and corrective. The preventative is measure that we're going to use to stop the breach. Detective is measure that we have on the system to alert that there is a problem or a breach. And the corrective is a measure to fix after there is a problem. So in the preventative, we could say that they use a firewall to block unauthorized access. Detective, they have a system that alert administrator of suspicious activity. Corrective, if a breach happens, they can restore lost data from backup. So all of these are measures that are put in place to ensure the safeguarding of the company's asset in security categories. So let's look at some multiple choice question. Which of the following is an example of preventative security control? Remember what we said preventative security control is? We are trying to prevent something, right? Is it A, firewalls blocking unauthorized access? B, intrusion detection system monitoring traffic? C, data backup after an incident occur? D, logging users activity? And we know it will be a firewall blocking unauthorized access because it's a preventative measure. Which of the following is a corrective measure control? What we said corrective measure control was trying to recover after and lost, right? So it's A, encryption of data before transmission. B, restoring data from backup after a data loss incident. C, regular checking access log for suspicious behavior. D, restricting access to confidential file. And we know that it will be B. It is restoring data from backups after a data loss incident. That is preventative. So all of these right here, we dealt with them just now. Preventative. So we just talk about preventative, detective, and corrective, right? So we're going to look at some scenarios. related to those. We did all of these already. Physical control, technical control, and administrative control. We did those. So these are security control types. Physical, remember we did those. Physical, these are the types or categories. So we're gonna take some break and then we're gonna get back after the break, right? Let's take some break. We're gonna do about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. We're gonna do 20 minutes because when we get back, let me see if I can find a nice trying to find us a nice. Let me just do the timer. Twenty minutes of timer. Just a minute. I'm trying to bring up the timer. So you can go on your 20 minutes break. I'm just going to share my screen with the timer so you can see when time to come back, okay? So your break start now. Well, welcome back. Welcome back. We get my timer off. Yep. Get the timer off. Welcome back. Welcome back. We are going to finish the remainder of my slides, right? The remainder of my slide. All right. So we it's telling me that it has started a new record, but that's okay. It should be one recording. All right, so let us go to gap analysis. So we are going to go through gap analysis, and after we finish gap analysis, I have some questions um, that is going to be of relevance to all of us. So let's go there. So we're going to look at gap analysis. Okay, did everybody had something to drink? You're good? Are you good to go? Because we may not have such a long break anymore. I'm going to try because it's a long subject area. So I usually try to give the students some form of break to get your brain, get some coffee. When you take a break, get some coffee, get some drink, get something, because the subject is not, you know, quick, walk over, got to process it, right? And I wanted to be able to do all of that. All right, so let's get to it. So we're going to look at gap analysis. And when we talk about gap analysis in the cybersecurity context, gap analysis refers to the process of evaluating an organization's current security posture against its desired security objective, right? So we try to look at what is there now and what is our objective. So we try to do a matching, right? A comparison rather. So in cybersecurity context, gap analysis refers to the process of evaluating an organization current cybersecurity posture against its desired security objective. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, in terms of looking at the gap. So we look at industrial standards, best practices. Okay, we look at all of those when we are trying to do gap analysis. The goal is to identify any deficiency and vulnerability. So when we're looking at gap analysis, the goal is to identify any deficiency or vulnerability or anything um, that exists that we don't want to, right? And to protect our organization. So that's what we're trying to do when we look at gap analysis. What is the importance of gap analysis in cybersecurity? Gap analysis identify vulnerabilities. By performing a gap analysis, organization can pinpoint existing vulnerability and weakness in their security defense. Right? So that's the importance. That's one. The next one is to ensure compliance. It helps organization to comply with regulations and frameworks, right? Strengthen defense mechanism. So it's important because it strengthens defense mechanism. Identifying gaps, allowing for prioritization of improvement and helps make better decision about where to allocate resource. And it helps you to prepare for threats. So gap analysis helps you to prepare for threats. It helps you to be proactive and manage emergency and as they before they occur or as they occur. Step in cybersecurity gap analysis, we review existing system. If you want to know what's the gap, we're going to review existing system, and then we're going to audit network infrastructure. So we're going to look at existing system, and then we're going to audit the network infrastructure. Now let's look at some scenario. Healthcare organization audits its IT system and finds that legacy, many legacy systems are not up to date with the latest security patch, right? Exposing them to vulnerability like ransomware attack. So that's a scenario. Scenario two, an e-commerce company enhancing protection for customer transaction organization. A mid-sized online retail retailer selling products to a global customer base, right? So these are like scenarios of what we're gonna do. The company use basic firewall to protect for protection, right? And has implemented SSL encryption for its e-commerce website. So they have this e-commerce company. It's a mid-sized company based on the information that we have here. It's an e-commerce company. What they do, they enhance protection for customer transaction, and we know that it's a mid-sized company. What can they do to enhance that protection? They are using SSL encryption for its website. However, the company does not use multi-factor authentication for customer accessing their accounts. There is no segmentation between customer data and company internal system, increasing risk for a large-scale breach if an attacker gains access to one system. Customer transaction data is stored in a plain database without any additional encryption. That is bad. Gap analysis, authentication gap, lack of multi-factor authentication for customer means their accounts are vulnerable to credential stuffing, right, and brute force. So the company need to do better than what they are doing now. So let's look at this scenario. The bank has a robust firewall in place, and all sensitive customer data is stored in a secure database. However, their data encryption practice only cover data in transit and not data rest. Their multi-factor authentication is only applied for high-level executive, leaving general employee without additional authentication method. Access control are based on user's name and password with no role-based restriction for employee. That is bad. So let's look at the gap analysis. Encryption gap is a problem. Sensitive customer data is vulnerable while stored on an internal server as it is not encrypted at rest. That's a gap. So the encryption gap, authentication gap. MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, is not applied uniformly across all employees, increasing the likelihood of unauthorized access due to weak passwords. Access control gap is another problem. So we have encryption gap in that scenario. We have authentication gap, and we have access control gap. Employee with access to customer data can freely view and edit information, raising the risk of inside threat. And we talk about the inside threat, and we did say that is bad for an organization because you can change logs and information. Gap analysis, multiple choice. In a financial institution, gap analysis, which of the following was identified as key vulnerability? Weak antivirus software, lack of encryption for customer data at risk, employees lack basic cybersecurity training, inconsistent firewall configuration. It will be B, lack of encryption for customer data at rest. Number two, in the healthcare organization gap analysis, what was the main cybersecurity issue identified with their legacy system? And you can go back and read it if you want. A, lack of MFA for employee. C, C, insufficient data access control. That's B. B is insufficient data access control. C, the system did not support modern encryption standard. D, employees were unable to recognize phishing attempts. And the answer here would be C, because the system did not support modern encryption standard. That's just poor. Still on gap analysis. In the e-commerce company gap analysis, what was identified as a potential risk regarding customer accounts? What was it? Do you remember? Do you remember what was the problem here? So in the e-commerce company, it was basically absent of multi-factors authentication for customer, as you remember. In manufacturing companies gap analysis, what security, what cybersecurity gap was identified in their industrial Internet of Things device? And if you can always go back and read it if you don't remember. Always, you can always go back and read it if you don't remember. Give me a minute. You could always go back and look at it. So let's move along, because these questions have to do with the scenarios that I just talk about. So let's look at zero-day exploits in cybersecurity. Zero-day exploit. What is a zero-day exploit? A zero-day exploit refers to a vulnerability or a flaw in a software, hardware, or system that is unknown to the software vendors or the public. So it is not known to the vendor and it is not known to the public. So it's a flaws, it's a vulnerability flaw. So let's go back to it again, because you're going to see here this. A zero-day exploit refer to a vulnerability or a flaw in a software, hardware, or system that is unknown to the software vendor or the public. These vulnerabilities are called zero days. Why? Because they are discovered and exploited by attackers before the vendor has a chance to create a release patch to fix it. So why is it called a zero-day? Again, let's go back over it. A zero-day exploit refers to a vulnerability or a flaw in a software or hardware that the vendor who sells it is not aware of and the public is not aware of it. It is called zero-day because it was discovered and exploited by an attacker, right? Before the vendor has a chance to release a patch to fix it. Since no defense is in place, they can be used for malicious purpose such as data theft, malware installation, or system infiltration, right? Zero-day attack. You have zero-day attack when an attacker takes advantage of zero-day vulnerability. It is called a zero-day attack. Remember we said the zero-day, the zero-day, remember we said that zero-day exploit is when there is a problem in the software or hardware, the vendors don't know, but attackers exploit it. So the zero-day attack is when the attacker takes advantage of zero-day vulnerability. That's because before the vendor can release a patch, it's already exploited. Attack. Zero-day vulnerability. This is a flaw in the system that the attacker exploit. Zero-day patch is when the software vendor become aware of the flaw and they develop and release a patch to fix it, to close the vulnerability. So the zero-day patch, the vendor is now aware of it, they release a patch to fix it. Why zero-day exploit are dangerous? It is unknown to the vendor. Until the vulnerability is discovered, no patch or mitigation strategies are available to defend against it. Time sensitive. The time between the discovery of the vulnerability by the attacker and its identification and patching is called zero-day windows. Wide impact and difficult to defend. This is why to detect. This is why it is so dangerous. It is a wide impact. It's difficult to detect. It's unknown to the vendor, and it is time sensitive. So, zero-day attack on a popular web browser. A technology. This is a scenario that we're going to do. A technology company that relies on a web browser for its business operation, zero day for its web operation. So it's zero-day vulnerability. A previous unknown flaws in a popular web browser allows attacker to execute arbitrary code on a system simply by visiting a malicious website, right? Exploitation. An attacker discover these flaws and begin to target users with a drive-by download attack. When users visit a compromised website, the attacker execute the malicious code that grants the attacker full access to their device. That's this one. So consequences: that attacker can gain access to sensitive users' data such as login credential, email, and financial details. So that's the consequence. How zero-day attack works: the discovery of the vulnerability, a hacker identify the flaw in the system that is unknown to the software vendor or the public. Development of exploit: the attacker craft and malicious payload and is designed to take advantage of the vulnerability. Exploitation of the system: the hacker uses the exploit to infect or gain access to the target system. It's always important that when there are patches and update that release, that you do them. The browser vendor releases an emergency zero-day patch to address the vulnerability, right? So these are actions you must take to ensure that you are protecting yourself against vulnerabilities. So let's look at some multiple choices. What is a zero-day attack? Number two, we know that zero-day attack or vulnerability that is exploit before it is made aware. Remember that. What is the primary reason a zero-day exploit is so dangerous? It's unknown to the vendor. There are many reasons. It is unknown to the vendor, an attacker, and attackers, and no fix is available. In a zero-day attack, what is the role of the attacker? To exploit the vulnerability, right? And to gain unauthorized access. In which of the following software are zero-day exploit most commonly found? Software with large user base such as operating system, browser, and cloud server. Those are where it often become a problem. What does a zero-day patch do? Do you remember that? It fix it does a fix on the release of the vulnerability, right? So it fix the vulnerability that is out there before an exploitation can take place. How can organization reduce the risk of zero-day exploit? How can we do that? By using advanced threat detection tools, patch management, and endpoint protection. So these are some questions that I put at the end of the of this, so all of you can do these questions. These are your short answer questions. I believe I should be able to go through all of these short answer questions. Threat and vulnerability question. What is the difference between threat and vulnerabilities? And we say that a threat is a potential danger, while vulnerability is a weakness in a system that can be exploited by threats. What does confidentiality protect? It ensures information is only accessible to authorized users and remain hidden from unauthorized access person. What is meant by data integrity? And we said that integrity means that the data is accurate, consistent, and hasn't been tampered with. Remember that? What does availability ensure in a system? These are questions that we're going through. Availability ensure that data and services are accessible and functional when needed. Remember that question. Non-repudiation. What does non-repudiation prevent? And we said it prevents someone from denying the action they have taken and ensuring accountability in transaction. Do you remember that? Zero trust. What is the key principle of zero trust model? Zero trust assures that no user or device inside or outside the network should be trusted by default. Continuous verification is required. Gap analysis. What does gap analysis identify in security? Gap analysis identify the difference between current security measure and the desired or required security state, right? Security control types. What is the difference between technical administrative control? We say that technical control, if you remember, technical control uses technology to enforce security like firewall, while administrative control involves policies and procedures, security training, and different recovery method. And this brings us to the conclusion of our class for today. It was my pleasure teaching this class. Guys, if you have any question, don't fail to reach out to me, email me, ask me whatever you so desire, and I will be more than happy to answer all your questions. Okay?